So this week's homework was focused on PERMA, and we talked about SBI. We wanted to share some of the reflections from the SBI assignment. Several of you shared your experience while using SBI in Schoology, and I want to just share a couple of them. So, Ashley said this is an interesting way to share feedback because it doesn't accuse or get overly emotional. Also, good to identify how our behavior made you feel so that the other party can understand where you're coming from. That is huge. And that's part of the reason that the SBI was created, is because it does take a lot of the emotional taxing that goes along with the giving feedback. Because lots of times when you're giving negative feedback, it stresses you out as much as it's going to stress out the person that you're giving the feedback to. It allows you to just cut to the core of what exactly is happening, and then talk about what behavior ultimately needs to change. Alan actually said that I love the specificity. Too often, feedback is broad or disconnected from the details that are meaningful and helpful to correct unwanted or encourage continued behaviors. Again, that potentially goes back to the poop sandwich, where it's sometimes in feedback, we're not being specific at all. We'll say a nice thing, and we'll say something that is specifically what we want to talk about, and then we'll say another nice thing, and ultimately that just ends up being just a big mess. Shannon actually gave some really great insight. She said, I really like how this is structured, keeping the emotion, judgment, and assumptions out of the feedback, whether good or bad. That's really an important tool in leadership and throughout the organization. It's something that should be taught to an entire team so that people know how to give and also receive feedback. I didn't get to practice this in real time, but I will definitely use this moving forward. Listen, this is the epitome of what it is that we want you guys to be able to use SBI for, is to be able to take it into your organizations and to begin to build a culture of feedback so that people can get good feedback and bad feedback, and then not feel people feel attacked, and it doesn't the good feedback doesn't come across as hollow and potentially corny. We really want to be able to give you the tools so that you can be able to communicate with your teams in ways for you to be able to not only grow through negative feedback, but we won't call it negative feedback, but just through critical feedback, but also through just positive praise and feedback. So, let's jump quickly into where we are in the Strong Cincinnati Institute. So, this is our final session. I almost cried when I realized that this was our final session together. I feel like we're so close now. We'll forever be family. This is session 6, part 2 of Strong Organizations. And today we're going to focus specifically on PERMA and well-being of your teams. Speaking of PERMA and well-being, the last week we laid out the foundation for strong organizations. The first step, we talked about radical candor, or discussing a culture of feedback, where you empower team members to be able to both give and receive feedback, praise and criticism along the way to navigate challenges successfully. Teams that avoid conflict, don't share feedback, and don't take the time to meaningfully appreciate one another will plateau in their change efforts at best. That's why we've chosen to focus on that so prominently. Now, secondly, monitoring and supporting staff well-being is a critical component of the strengths-based culture. So today we're going to revisit your PERMA well-being framework. We're going to take a pulse of your team's well-being, and we're going to share strategies and tools for boosting, measuring, and supporting well-being across your organization through strength. So ultimately, it's important to remember that these components go hand in hand. A strong culture of feedback supports workplace well-being because it creates a space for people to have honest conversations about what's going well and what could be better in terms of well-being. And practicing radical candor will help us be able to be as clear as possible when it comes to communication around feedback and praise. Today, we've already done our intro and agenda. I'm actually going to throw it over to Joe to do our team PERMA review. He's going to spend about 30 minutes doing that. Then Janice is going to talk about leading with strengths, and then I'm going to close this out with the team's cultural vision, where we're going to go deep into figuring out what does a strength-based cultural shift look like for us. And then finally, we'll talk about next steps and the evaluation. But now I am going to stop sharing and allow Joe to take the show and talk about PERMA.
right, good morning, everybody. Everyone good? You can see my slide? I haven't facilitated in weeks, so I'm super nervous. Actually, just kidding. I'm really excited to actually get to facilitate for about 30 minutes today. So for today's session, as Phil shared, we're continuing our conversation about strong organizations. Last session, we spent all of our time really focused on building that culture of feedback. Today, we're going to pick up on part 2 about PERMA and well-being. So we're going to do a really, really quick review. We spent a lot of time on well-being in session 2, Strong Self Part 2, as it relates to your own individual well-being. As you recall, you all took the PERMA survey, got your individual reports, and set some goals for how you want to improve your own individual well-being. Well, today we're actually going to look at the report that we sent you yesterday for your team's overall well-being. But
Hey,
just to
Joe,
reorient yourself, yeah.
not to interrupt you, but I think that we are looking at your notes.
Oh. Let me try this again. How's that?
No, you have to share the different screen. When you're sharing, you have to share a different screen.
I'm just pressing.
No, so you have to go back to Zoom. You have to go back to Zoom and reshare so that you're sharing. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
I know you're new at this, Joe.
Yeah. I have a great excuse.
It's new dad fog. Yes.
Yeah. Is that better?
No, that's not better.
Oh God. Okay. Oh man.
You want me to share?
Go ahead, Phil. Yeah. I do have an excuse that I can use for a while, which is I am operating on a couple hours of sleep. So thanks to a great little guy we have living in our house now named Graham. So Phil, you're bringing it back up. Thank you. Thanks for the assist. I needed that. Okay. So going ahead to the next slide, well-being. So as you recall, well-being is all about, honestly, just very simply, our ability to feel good and function effectively. We have high well-being when the challenges that we face are in balance with the resources we have to face them. And as you recall, we talk about character strengths as being one of those most important resources that you can pull from, those best qualities in yourself to deal with those stresses that we face in life. When you have high levels of well-being, lots of good things happen. You're more resilient, you have higher job satisfaction, you're more productive, more effective in the workplace, lots and lots of good stuff that we all want. So moving on to the next slide, we talked about PERMA. We did a deep dive into each of these 6 categories. PERMA is just a framework to more specifically understand well-being along 6 different dimensions that have been proven through research to be critical to your level of thriving in life. We have positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishment, and health. So you had a chance to look at your levels of well-being, your own individual levels of well-being in your individual report. Again, today, we're going to take a deeper dive into how your team and how your organization is doing along those dimensions. Speaking of which, hopefully everyone got the email that Maya sent yesterday with your organizational, your team PERMA report. If you had a chance to either save it to your computer or maybe you printed off a few pages of it, I'm going to walk through. There are a lot of pages in that report, to be clear, and they're all useful in different ways. There's a lot of information about how to read your report. I'm guessing that most people didn't do all that, which is totally understandable. Didn't expect you to. So I want to take just a couple minutes before I turn you all loose in your teams to debrief your report to just walk through the different components. And this is all on the summary page in your report. In this particular one, it's the sample report. This is page 7. I think it's page 7 in everyone's report. So the first section is, you might remember this quadrant, these 4 quadrants. This is a snapshot of your team's overall well-being as it relates to these 4 categories. Remember the continua of high thriving to low thriving, high struggle to low struggle. Now, the important thing to remember is those top 2 boxes are the ones that we really want to shoot for. Folks who are living well despite struggles show the same levels of resilience and job satisfaction and overall well-being as those who are in that consistently thriving category. It doesn't mean that we are ashamed of having folks in either of those other 2 categories. In fact, it's important for us to know and to address openly within our teams. So this is a high-level snapshot that you can use just to get a gauge of where everyone is. The second category, we've got well-being, ability, and motivation. You might remember from our second session, we talked about these two components as being really important indicators as to whether or not you or your team will continue to improve well-being. So ability basically just means, do you know how to improve your well-being? Do you have resources? Do you have strategies to actually do that? Motivation is, do you care? Do you actually want to improve your well-being? At an organizational level, the extent to which you provide support to people to boost their ability and the extent to which you prioritize well-being as a critical strategic priority in the organization can have a massive impact on those two outcomes. So when you're looking at your report, take a look at those two pieces and see what that tells you about where people are starting. The next section. So this is breaking down those 6 pillars of PERMA, P through H. And in this particular report, we're looking at 3 different levels. We're looking at individual results, team results, and organization results. The individual row is essentially an aggregate of the individual results of the folks who took the PERMA survey from your team. So this is looking at overall, how are individuals on the team feeling about their well-being? That second row is team. So the questions, if you recall in the PERMA survey, are asking you to reflect on well-being levels within your team, your perspective on that. So that team row is sort of how your team, the team that you report to or team that you're a part of, is doing with its well-being. And then organization is the whole organization. Now, we have 2 teams or 2 organizations a part of this cohort that are relatively small with Breakthrough and Mortar. So the difference between team and organization and kind of how you would orient to those 2 is probably pretty minimal. But with DOTE and Free Store Food Bank, much larger organizations, that team row might be even more important. And that's a really helpful insight as you're looking at, if you're in DOTE, you've got 100, 120 or so employees in multiple different divisions, being able to eventually assess your whole team and look at how different divisions are doing with well-being could be really, really helpful for understanding how folks are doing. One other thing to note about this data, the research from the Wellbeing Lab, this isn't always, shows that generally the individual scores are the highest of these 3, followed closely by team and then by organization. So people tend to feel better about how they themselves are doing than they do about their overall team or the organization itself. So check your results to see if that holds true, and if not, what that might be telling you about well-being levels in your team. The next category are what we call the well-being enabling factors. I can't remember the specific term from the report, but these are 6 different factors within your organization that have been in organizations that have been shown to contribute to high or low levels of thriving. So these are kind of these enabling factors that might be playing a role in whether your well-being is showing up at really high or not so high. So you've got things like autonomy. Do people feel like they have the flexibility to make decisions for themselves? Relatedness, are there close, deep relationships? The one that we have talked about a bit, and that I think is probably, if I had to say was most important, is that psychological safety piece. Do people feel okay and comfortable and safe talking about how they're struggling? Is it okay to have those conversations? Creating that space within an organization is essential for being able to really talk about, explore, and unpack well-being. Lastly, we've got 3 different indicators, satisfaction-related indicators: job satisfaction, team satisfaction, organization satisfaction. So again, these 3 levels: are people overall satisfied with their jobs? Are they satisfied with their teams? Satisfied with their organization? The big thing to know is the research around these indicators are most closely tied to positive emotion. When people have higher levels of positive emotion, they tend to feel more satisfied about these 3 different components. You might check your report to see if there's a correlation there as well. One thing I will say overall, when whether you're looking at your individual report or your team report, it's important not to only focus on your lowest scores. It's important to also pay attention to where you're doing really well, because those are components that you can build on going forward. And there is no shame. There's no shame in struggling, especially right now, when we know that our organizations and all of us as individuals are facing so many different challenges. So that's a quick overview of that report. We want to give you some time now within your teams to just have a conversation about it. So two prompts. First, what stands out to you about your team PERMA results? As you looked at that summary page, as you flipped through, kind of what stood out to you? What was surprising? What was insightful? Have that conversation first. And then if you have time, start talking about which areas of PERMA that you really want to focus on going forward. What parts of this this report are most compelling as priority areas for you? We're going to moving into team breakout rooms, and one of our team members of the 4 of us will pop in after a couple of minutes to see if you have any questions and to kind of help you along through that process. If you're all good to go, we'll leave again, but we'll be there to help. I saw a question in the chat about what's the highest question, the highest score you can get on the PERMA. The scores range from 0 to 100, and the Wellbeing Lab will say that generally a score of 70 or above is considered good, but remember that the scores are all relative. If you have other questions, anyone have any other questions about the report? Okay. So Maya's going to move everyone into breakout rooms based on your team. Go ahead and accept that invitation, and we will be joining you. We'll pop in just a couple minutes. With these reports, and you know, we encourage you all to take some additional time, be outside of the session to revisit and discuss these results, and it's something that we're happy to do with you as well. More so as part of our action planning session that'll come after this session. But I do want to take a moment to hear quickly from one person in each team. What was one insight that your team pulled out about your report? Something that you found particularly interesting, something that was an aha moment, a question that it raised for you. Love to hear from one person from each team before we move on to the next part.
I can go for Mortar real quick.
Thanks, Vic.
We just kind of realized we maybe need to take this again in a couple of months. When we took the test, we were going through a lot of changes on our team and as an organization. So looking at these scores, we were like, do we really feel that way still? And Phil mentioned they're not supposed to take it, more than twice in a year, but so we're like, maybe after Christmas break when we've got some new team members and kind of just see how it feels then, because we were stressy and aggressy when we took this the first time. So we're better now.
I was just saying that to the DOTE crew that you know, the survey it's a reflection of that particular moment in time, in much of the same way as your strengths report is. Wherever you are in that moment, what the challenges you're facing, the good things that are happening, it all does have an impact. And I will say it's typically at an organizational level, you know, it's usually not feasible to assess more than a couple times a year, but researchers do encourage individuals to take the survey on a more regular basis, because again, you can have those fluctuations from month to month or quarter to quarter based on how things are going. So those are things that we can support you all with beyond the Institute. Thank you, Vic. How about our other teams?
I'll go for the free store. We talked about our connection while you said don't focus on the negatives or the low scores. We did kind of go there, but we went there from a different standpoint of looking at what that positive emotion and health. And so when we looked at as the organization with the other parts of PERMA, if those things are in line, kind of our mission and our meaning and what we're doing, why aren't we exhibiting maybe a little higher positive emotion? And then we have the health part. And so it's the health part more self, and it manifests itself and basically in the work we're doing, like we push out, but maybe not taking enough time for some self-reflection and how we can look at it, some self-introspection. I think we all are so, we're connected to our mission and doing that we don't step back sometime and take care of ourselves more. So maybe getting more of our team members involved, using this information we have an employee engagement committee with our organization. We have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, and kind of get these things together, combine all these groups to help us to understand, so we can work on the health piece of our organization and increasing that.
Yeah. I love that you got focused on two areas that feel really important and really aligned. That is with positive emotion and health. Part of the reason why that is so important is it sounds like there would be a significant amount of motivation for people to work on that, because it feels like things that matter, they're aligned to your mission. That's important, because if they don't feel critical and don't feel important, then you're less likely to make progress on it. I also love the idea of bringing other people into the conversation as well, really unpacking it, because you can't, the numbers only tell you so much. But when you look at, hey, our health scores are lagging at an organizational level, what is leading to that? Let's have a conversation. Let's build then a plan to address that. So I love that. And again, we'd be happy to help with that in any way beyond the Institute. Okay, we got Breakthrough and we got DOTE.
I can go. This is Julie. I want to thank Janice for helping with some clarity on just how the page was laid out. So I think we understand what we're looking at, which is a good place to start. And picking up on things that have already been said, to what Vic said, I think we noticed sort of a seasonality, if you will, in the way, like what we saw showing up in our report, and kind of pondered where we are now in kind of our annual life cycle, because things are just really different for us in our peak summer season. And this is kind of a shoulder season for us anyway, not to mention kind of, I don't know, just the world that surrounds us. And so we noticed some of the health factors that I think Valerie was sharing, and just kind of what that means. So, I think we picked up on, where there might be opportunity for us to look at what's true always versus just now, and whether we might want to look at taking it again at some point, not to dismiss what there is now, but we were just kind of talking about our life cycle and timing and what that might tell us. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. On health in particular, it is the PERMA pillar I think that people are most drawn to organizationally. It's also the one that's oftentimes lowest for our partners, because you all are in mission-driven work, whether you work at the city, you work in a nonprofit, and when you have a mission, missions like what you all have, it's really easy to work exceptionally long hours and to not take care of yourself in the ways that are pretty common. So the good news is that we've had partners prioritize health in the past and get really hyper focused on that and building out some strategies that everyone's excited about, and they've seen some real growth and improvement. So again, we'd be happy to kind of share that knowledge and even connect you with some of those partners if it's helpful. Okay, we got one more, DOTE.
I can share. I guess
Morning.
we kind of focused a little bit more on our graph that we had at the top and how we were thriving and or not thriving, and probably just kind of focusing a little bit more on like why we think that is. But we also have to keep in mind, like Joe had said, just keeping that in mind that it is only a snippet in time. And I think the realization I had, at least as to speak as an individual, I guess why it was kind of more of a low thriving is just everything that's been going on. I think Vic had kind of mentioned it with Mortar, just that in that timing of going through a lot of transitions and a lot of the just struggles going on at that time from when we took the test, versus maybe if we give it another couple months, and as the dust settles, through all of the COVID stuff and all these major changes, kind of seeing if that would maybe take a little bit of a change.
Yeah, the context you described, I am sure, has played a major role in those results. It also sounded like at the end of the conversation, it would be helpful to draw maybe some other folks into this conversation too, to talk about bigger picture, what's happening and where there could be more support. And one thing I want to emphasize before we move on, when you look at this report, there's so much in there. There's so many numbers. Where do you start? What do we do with all this? The most important thing to remember, whether you're thinking about yourself individually with your well-being or as an organization, is to start with small steps. What's something that you feel motivated to work on, and a small step you can take going forward. If you have success with those, it helps to build your motivation, helps to build your ability levels where you feel like you can actually make a difference. So that's why I love when people are talking about, yes, positive emotion and health. Let's really get together and focus on those areas. That'll get us going. Really excited to continue these conversations with you all after the Institute. But as I close out this section, I want to share just a couple of things to keep in mind about how you can use the PERMA, how you can use this data, this particular tool in your work going forward. So making well-being stick. How does it go from being just a random survey you took during the Institute to something that can really support your organization? One is this idea of taking a regular pulse. Really think about this as a way of taking stock of your organizational culture. This is different though. This isn't an assessment to beat yourself up about or to benchmark yourself against other departments or other teams. This is about really just having the information you need to know how folks are doing. We have the resources that allow you to do that. For folks who are managers in this session, this is a great way to check in with your people to see how they're doing. Many of you probably have been asking that question. How is it going? There's a lot going on now. Are you holding up okay? This gives you how are you is kind of a general question. If you have the well-being language to talk to use in those conversations, it can make it much more meaningful, much more targeted. Next, looking at performance review or performance management. We have tools that integrate PERMA into annual reviews. So you're able to talk about overall how was your well-being in the workplace this year, and what can we do to set targets going forward. The next is talking openly about it at team meetings. So when you get into those conversations as a team, how's everyone doing? Where might we focus, especially once you set those priority areas? Keeping tabs on those. Supporting each other and holding each other accountable, especially when you set those individual goals. Having someone that you can work with on that can be especially helpful. And then lastly, this is a bigger one, but these can definitely come from some of your conversations. Look at organizational policy structures and routines that are either supporting or maybe inhibiting well-being, and think about how those might be shifted a bit to support this focus on well-being. Those are some strategies to think about. And again, more opportunities for us to talk as follow-up from the Institute, but wanted to get you all at least oriented to that. Very quickly, I know I've been mentioning that we have resources available for you to continue to assess. In fact, our partnership with the Wellbeing Lab allows us to set up a PERMA dashboard site for each of our organizations where you can assess organization-wide well-being as you please, as many times as you want, with our support as well built in. That gives you the capability to track results in a dashboard format, print organizational reports, add questions to the survey, and to make it possible for individuals to take the PERMA as many times as they'd like. So that's a free offering that we have for all of our network partners that will work with you after the Institute to integrate as you'd like. So we come to that time for a quick stretch. We're gonna do, we're doing 3 minutes here. Where are we at, Janice? I know I'm turning it over to you next. Okay. So why don't we say it's 10:23 right now. Take a quick pause. We'll see you at 10:27.
So the last portion of our time together, oops, I don't want him to start yet. Yep. The last portion of our time, we're going to help you figure out how you can really transform your cultures, how you can make a difference in your organization as champions, right? You're the ones who can motivate and drive all this change and be conscious of it and play a role in it, both by modeling the type of strengths-based culture that you want to see and helping others activate their own strengths, right? It's really becoming a champion. And when you do that, when you create change in an organization, it's similar to building a movement, which I don't know if any of you have seen this video. It's a little bit old, but it's one of my favorites because it's real life. And so I'm gonna watch a really fun video and then we'll talk about it for a second.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
So, I love that. It's kind of inspiring, and it's just how we all act. And it really, it's the idea that we're all leaders, whether we lead people directly, whether we lead our peers, whether we lead ourselves, just by inspiring and watching for something, for change, and then being able to champion it. And that's what we really want you to think about in your organizations, because you don't want to just leave this whole 6-week session and just say, that was fun, that was nice, that was interesting. You really want to transform your cultures. And that will only be is if you collectively work together, find your roles, find your authentic leadership self. So that's what we're going to focus on now. So what I'd like you to do first, though, best thing is always find that role model in your life. Who's that ideal leader, the greatest leader that you've personally either worked with or just known, who's really inspired you personally in your life? Probably at work, but it could be outside of work as well. What we're going to do, we're going to break you into groups of 4 as well this time, just random groups of 4 for about 8 minutes. And if you could go around the circle talking about and describing and identifying the strengths that that person displayed as when they were in that greatest leader role that you so admire. So what strengths really came to the fore when they were being great leaders? Okay, so think about who that would be. And then we're going to break into groups and just talk about your favorite leader. I can see everybody now. Wonderful, welcome back. And what I love is a couple of people, what kind of strengths did you spot? What were they different, similar across all the leaders that were identified? Who can share out a little bit? What strengths? You can chat it in, or you can talk to me about it. Valerie, I see you're off mute. Did you want to share?
I wasn't off mute, but I could share.
Yeah.
We talked. We had a great conversation. One was around your parents some of the qualities that they instilled in you that then made you the person you are today. Also some former either managers or leaders who helped you, and even if if they was hard on you or those kind of things, you took those qualities and used those to move forward. So honesty was one, you know, just positive thinking, encouragement. So we had a great conversation around, you know, just how your leader made you. It's basically around how you made you feel and encouraged and supported you in your development.
And it's interesting, I think leadership is like the linchpin to teamwork also, in that, it's like the conductor of a symphony. You need somebody, and then from that, good leadership really does flow good teamwork because you're on a team with them. I'm actually watching, if anybody's watching the series Away, I think it's a Netflix series, and it's about traveling to Mars. It's just a wonderful expose on leadership and teamwork blending together. It's really beautifully done. Anybody else who can share some strengths that they noticed from the team, the leaders?
Sure, I'll share. I'll say Alan and Elena shared that their previous bosses or current bosses really took the time to check on them as individuals, and was really compassionate towards their well-being. And a lot of times it came before checking in for the work of the organization. And that just really meant a lot. One thing Elena said, and that she said she believes, is that people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. And so it was really having those leaders check in with them to make sure that they're doing okay. And Alan even said, you know, that's something he implements in his leadership style, and checking in with people to make sure they're doing okay before diving into the crux of the work or what's missing and what still needs to be done. Another thing that I know Alan does, and Elena mentioned as well, is that, you know, with her boss, her leader, is that she never encourages the employees to do something that she doesn't take the time to do. So for example, if, you know, the boss takes 3 weeks vacation, she's going to make sure that she's encouraging all the other employees to, hey, take your 3 weeks vacation. Like, you know, you've done the job, you're doing this right. Like, and if you know, got to the point where you're able to take vacation, like you're doing everything you need to be doing. And so it was just like, as a leader, never doing things or expecting your staff to do things that you wouldn't then do yourself.
Which I think is a lot of humility. Thank you for sharing that, Tim. I mean, it's interesting that I think we've gotten to the point in the life cycle of leadership overall that we're valuing a lot more of this vulnerability and humility for. It's sort of the servant leadership model, but it's just being, you know, not being the arrogant, just commanding from the top, right? But really being part of, again, back to teamwork. It's a teamwork kind of leadership model. That's beautiful, and it sets the pattern for everybody. Right. So those are great, and I want you to think about that and always focus on it. And when you meet a new leader, identify the different strengths that they're doing, because they are your role models, and they do inspire. So when we talk about strengths-based leadership, it is about showing up authentically in being the leader. I think from the very beginning, we said, you may not have leadership as one of your top strengths, but you will lead as a leader through your top strengths. And that makes you essential to who you are. And it's essential for building a strengths-based culture. Whether you supervise people directly or show leadership by influencing your peers, there's always an opportunity to be a strengths-based leader. So what do we mean by that? I mean, it's so simple. Strengths-based leader, it is leading authentically with your strengths and then activating the strengths in others. And that's really what we just described. It's, why do we do it? It makes
Looks like Janice is frozen there.
Oh, okay. I thought it was just me.
No.
And then for the organization, what?
Janice, you were just frozen for about 15 seconds, but you're back now.
Oh, I just
talking
saw
about
that
how great authenticity is.
I was authentically myself. I hope I was frozen nicely. So it is all about why it's good for you. It's higher psychological well-being, enhanced personal autonomy, and really giving you that mission, that purpose in life, something that's bigger than yourself. And then, of course, if you're functioning at a level that you're engaged and feeling good and authentic, the organization is going to benefit as well. Positive decision-making, increased organizational performance, and higher individual productivity. I think we are all feeling it out of these, the discussions we've been having, that being the real you, showing up as work as you, as a worker and as a leader, is really going to be determinant on overall well-being. And knowing that, though, like, why don't we all just do that all the time? There's actually reasons, and we addressed some of this last week, just in how we give feedback, being true to ourselves and leaning into our strengths. It's not always easy to give feedback the most natural way that it comes to us, because in the workplace, there's just different barriers at times. Think of, if your authentic self is not in line with the dominant work culture in whatever way, it will be harder. I remember years and years ago, this is one of my first jobs. It was big corporate world, and they had given us some kind of assessment to find out if you were left-brained or you were right-brained. This was one of those off-site leadership things. And then they grouped everybody, all you right-brained people, that meant all the creatives on one side of the room, and all you left-brained people on the other side of the room. And I remember standing there, I was the right-brained. That was meaning I was kind of creative and kind of loosey-goosey all over the place. And there was one other person with me. And then like everybody else was on the other side, and all my managers and supervisors, all the leadership were on the other side. And I thought, oh my God, like I'll never succeed. And they must look at me like I'm a fool. And it was just such a scary, intimidating moment in my life. And I certainly thought at that time that I had to hide whatever. I had to change. I had to become left-brained. I had to become more linear and rational and focused and all of that. Yes, maybe a little. But it really squashed the true self of who I was for a long time. So why is that? What we find is that statistically, still, just to lay what's the landscape now out there for nonprofits, just the way it is, 58% of nonprofits are led by men. I think there's a statistic like there are more men CEOs who are named John than there are women CEOs in the country. So I sometimes say, no, that couldn't be. We've changed, we've made. But I recently in Business Courier, they were showcasing, I think, the 100 top CEOs in town. And I think out of 100, they were like 10. So it was incredible, because you could see the photos one after another, how few women were actually in leadership roles, senior leadership roles. Also, predominantly for nonprofit executives, they tend to be white. So, does that mean that's just a fact, and it's evolving and it's changing? But how do you bring your real self to work if you're in that situation where you're the only ones? How do you feel free to be who you are, your authentic self? And we're still in a world actually that is pretty macho and bravado, and this is changing. And I love to hear that what we just talked about in terms of leadership style, the humility and vulnerable leader. But still, there's a lot of what is perceived as bullying. 63% of Americans are aware of bullying at work. So again, if that could really set off, do I fit in? And the studies show, there's a researcher named Laura Morgan Roberts, and what she's found is that the further you deviate from these norms of being maybe a male and maybe being white and maybe being aggressive, the further you deviate from that, the more likely that it's harder for you to bring all true parts of yourself to work. Not all the time, and hopefully we're in more nurturing environments that are freeing, and that's what we're moving toward. But it just happens because if leadership, remember that confirmation bias or that strengths bias, if leadership is one way, then they will, what the research shows is that they're going to praise those who are more like them more often and criticize those like me standing on the left, the side of the room with all the couple of creative goofballs, that we're going to be criticized much more. So it's harder for you to bring out yourself, and yet essential to bring out yourself, because it was eventually when I learned to bring my true authentic self. And if you watch the video, the pre-work, I finally became the go-to creative person in my corporate world. And it just flipped everything when I was strong enough and I'm brave enough to bring forth a lot of the things that I thought weren't valued, when I could have that voice then my world and the actually the organizations or the business world started to change. And so it's a good thing to think about. What do you, based on all of this, just curious, in research that's been done, what do you think, chat in, what percent of people do you think actually leave critical parts of themselves at home, that they cover aspects of who they are in front of their coworkers? Anybody have a sense, know what you think? What would be the, looking at my chat.
We've got some answers coming in.
Yep. Pretty good
62,
answers.
45, 63, 70,
Yeah.
89, 75, 52. A lot of 40s to 60s.
I like that 99%.
Yeah.
And I think, that's true, because even when you're answering this, like how many people really answer honestly, or even really have reflected enough on to know themselves well enough. I think it's probably closer to 98, but the research shows that 61% will admit to leaving part of themselves at home. And that's just something to think about as we move forward into really being able to nurture that true self of who we are. So what we'd like to do now is break into rooms. Again, these will be 3-person breakouts. And want you to, reflect for a moment. And as you're in the rooms, are there certain top strengths that you're unable to bring fully forward at work, and why? Discuss how you can bring these strengths more fully going forward. So think about that. Break into your rooms. Think about those strengths and maybe it's not in your current role. Maybe it's in former roles, like I was talking about my history in corporate America and how I've evolved. But what strengths? Either then or right now, would you like to, that you sort of leave at home and you'd like to lean into more fully going forward? Anybody have any questions on that before we break out? Okay, so we'll have, if they don't have that same strengths of spirituality, that they're not included. So there's probably a tempering of it that you have to do. But it's an interesting challenge, because we don't want you to leave spirituality behind, really, because that wouldn't be the true you. So, yeah, fascinating. Well, thank you for sharing that. What we do, so this is all getting to what that authentic leadership style is, and what we do and we're going to not be able to do this exercise right now because we're running out a little tight on time, and we really want to get to the section Phil's going to take you for in terms of action planning, starting to action plan. But we do want what we do, and I recommend this is really fun when we do this in person. We actually do hand out crayons, and we ask people to figure out. And you saw this in the video that you watched in advance. What is your tagline? What is that thing that you can go to that personifies who you are? Your leadership plaque based on. So we ask people, and we recommend you do this maybe at your next team meeting, because it is a real fun exercise. We've gotten crazy, interesting ideas of how people would take their 5 top strengths, the ones that most resonate with them, and then come up with a description of who they are. So for me, I really, and I love this, when I'm feeling down, I can go back to this. I literally have this folded in on my desk, creative yaysayer. So yes, the creative stuff, but the yaysayer, that was part of, like, I'm the one who I can say, yes, we're going to figure that out. Yes, we're going to make that happen. And that reassures me, especially when, when things are tough and going, when we're facing challenges. So I recommend, this is a great fun exercise. Take out your crayons, you can draw it, you can write it, you can do whatever you want, but come up with a tagline and a leadership plaque that you can always use as a reminder of who you really are, what your style is, and how you want to bring that to work every day. Okay, so I'm gonna close out now from my portion and hand it back over to Phil, so that you can figure out how to take that leadership style and start championing strengths-based change across your culture. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing and hand it back over to Phil.
Over here talking and I'm clearly on mute. So what we're going to do next is we are going to break all of our teams into breakout rooms, and we're going to talk about how we can begin to build a strength-based culture. So over the next 20 minutes, we're going We're going to break into our teams, and we're going to walk through these 3 questions. And the first question I really want you to focus on the most, because in 20 minutes, we may not have enough time to get past the very first question. But the 3 questions that we want to focus on, the first question being most important, is what will a strength-based culture look like inside of your organization? So I want you as a team to begin to like vision set what the future looks like as you start to create a strength-based culture inside of your organization. Ask yourself questions about what would you change? What would you keep the same? What will be important to this organization? And how will you create a space for that to exist inside of your organization? The next question I want you to be able to answer, if you can get past the first one in 20 minutes, is what will be required to activate this culture in your workplace? And then finally, you're going to ask you, what barriers do you anticipate along the way? So what we're going to do is we're going to break you into your teams, and then also a member from our team will be with each one of your teams and just help you answer some of the questions, or maybe even just prod and poke you to answer some of these questions as you are going through this process. Again, the most important question to answer right now is the first question, which is what will a strength-based culture look like inside of your organization? And at the end, I want one person to come back to our group and share out the answer to number 1, like what will a strength-based culture look like for your organization? So we're going to go into breakout rooms for 20 minutes. Yes.
Yeah, and right now, when Maya's entering the Google Docs into the chat room and into the chat box. So for everybody, you'll have one specific to your organization, and that's the one you want to click on so that that Google Doc can be shared and you can work on it collectively together at the same time. So when you get into breakout rooms, be sure to click on the Google Docs that you see listed for by your organization.
Absolutely.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I will give everybody a minute to click on the Google Doc now, right before Maya sends us to our breakout room. And now I'm guessing everybody had enough time to click on there. Now you can jump into your breakout rooms once Maya sends out that invitation. Again, this will be about
I'm going to continue setting them up.
already. The teams will get about 20 minutes. And during that 20 minutes, again, focus on what will a strength-based culture look like in your organization. This is the fun part. We get to put everything that we've done as a group together to say, you know, this is what it looks like for us. Here's what a strength-based organization is going to look like for us.
We're probably going to be a little less than 20 minutes because we've only got 20 total minutes left. So we're probably looking at more like 10 or 12 to get the conversation started. And we're going to pick this up in our action planning conversations with your team. So this is a kind of a starting point to build on for that particular planning work.
And the idea is that one of you or all of you can work on the document together to fill it, literally type into that red box, the first on the left, what will a strengths-based culture look like in your organization? So just sort of brainstorm, think about it, create.
On that. So what a strength-based culture looks like for Mortar, and Alan mentioned it before, is just allowing all of ourselves to authentically, show up in that space and then operating in our strengths. One thing that we really highlighted and noticed that would be a benefit to us is just encouraging people to use their lesser strengths. So maybe the strengths that aren't, top 2, using those to really grow each person as an individual, but using it also as a learning opportunity to explore. Alan brought up the fact that, love is my number 1, different things like that. But in working together, realizing how we can use our lesser strengths and like in our relationship with each other to kind of grow in that strength as an individual, and more so adding to the team dynamic at Mortar as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody from DOTE want to share? Or who's going to share from DOTE?
I guess I'll jump in reluctantly.
Right.
We were all over the place in ours, but I think listening to what's going on, I think the biggest thing from our end is communication. There really doesn't seem to be a whole lot from the top down. It's the top guys tell the supervisors, this is how it's going to be, this is what's going to be done. The supervisors then relay that to the workers, and there's really not a whole lot of communication up or down. I think more communication, a little bit more input, and maybe changing the way we do staff meetings and things like that. Instead of just saying, this is what's going on, maybe try to get some feedback and input.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's actually a really great insight. As we start our next steps on this, and we'll talk about that on the next slide, but as we start our next steps, I think that could be something that we can build into how you can implement that strength-based culture and create lines of clear communication from the top down and from the bottom up. Yeah, top down, bottom. Yeah, just to make sure that there's plenty of communication going up and down. Breakthrough.
I can go just real fast. I think we have a lot more work to do, which is exciting. And I think one of the things that came up today is how this translates into our summer season culture with our seasonal summer staff, and it's an academic enrichment program. So working some more, I think, with Mayerson to see how this work shows up with students as well. So we're looking forward to that in the future.
Yeah, that's super duper exciting. Yeah, I know that we are really excited about working with you as we move forward. We know that you're going to be a great partner, and yeah, we're like really excited about that. And our last group, Free Store Food Bank, last but not least.
I'll go ahead. I think, one thing that we saw is that there's a lot of different things, and a lot of it boils down to some of the communication that I think we've touched on, and all the groups have mentioned a little bit. I think, one thing that has resonated, at least with me in the conversation we had, was the fact that when people bring ideas to the forefront, then maybe even if we vet those ideas, that we're not circling back with those folks that have shared those ideas to say, yes, those will be implemented, they can't be implemented, or these are the reasons why they can't be implemented. I think that closing that communication loop, I think, is something that we're going to look at and see how we can focus in on both the positive emotions as well as the health of our organization, and figure out how we bring those two things together.
Yeah, that's going to be a big job. I mean, communication is huge in all of this, but Mayerson is here to help as you're going through this process. And again, we're also excited to see what happens as you're starting to implement this process, but we'll be right there. So with that in mind, I want to start talking about next steps. So what you're going to see from us in the next couple of weeks is going to be an invitation from our team for an action planning workshop. What we're going to do in this action planning workshop is we're going to start to walk through this strength-based culture that you want to create inside of your organization, and start creating some actual strategies and actions and tactics that you can do to begin to put these things into place. We're also going to provide all of our strength-based resources that we have, everything from all of the recordings of all the courses that we've done so far together, and then also just some other strength-based resources that we pulled together over the last couple of years. We've come up with some really great tools that you can use, including the Strengths Compass, which is really great for leading and managing the performance of your team. We also have some things that focus specifically on strength-based hiring practices. That's not quite baked yet, but is a really great tool that Janice and I have been working on. And then we have a lot of other strength-based resources that we have been developing and have developed over the years. And then finally, now that you are all graduates from the Strong Cincinnati Institute, now you get to join the Strong Cincinnati Network. And as members of the network, you are going to have the opportunity to come to monthly, bi-monthly courses and sessions that we have been presenting to individuals who have graduated, the alumni of the Strong Cincinnati Institute. And ultimately the goal of the network is to be able to create space inside of Cincinnati that is specifically strength-based, for you guys to be able to create strength-based resources for each other and answer some of the questions that you may have around strength-based work. So we created a network so that people can support each other in strength-based work. With that in mind, we are also inviting you all to join us for a conversation with two local 2020 Strengths heroes. We're going to have the first annual Strong Cincinnati Network celebration. It's going to be called A Time for Strengths. And during that session, it's going to be, I believe it's November 19th. I think it's 2 Thursdays from now. We're going to do an interview with Alandis Powell, who is the VP of Business Controls at Fifth Third Bank, and also our own Kurt Reiber here, the CEO of Free Store Food Bank. So I'm going to be part of that conversation. It's going to be super exciting to talk about it and walk through what A Time for Strengths looks like. So we're going to be sending out emails, if you haven't received it already, as an invite to that particular session. Finally, congratulations. You have graduated from the Strong Cincinnati Institute. Give yourself a big round of applause. We're going to be sending out certificates of completion, and our hope is that you will take these strengths with you during the holiday season when you're with your families. There's some fun activities that we did together. Maybe you could have your whole family take the VIA and start walking through like what that potentially conversation could look like. This is going to be an exciting time. Maybe you want to just take some time and use your strengths to be able to pull yourself together because you don't get along with your uncle who comes into town every year. I'm sorry, that's me. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, just take your strengths with you and have an awesome time. And then finally, please share your feedback. The survey was already dropped into the chat, to my knowledge. We definitely want all of your feedback. So give us about 5 or 10 minutes to just share your feedback with us. And as always, thank you from the Strong Cincinnati team. This has been awesome. We really appreciate all of the time and effort that you put into the work. And yeah, it's been a blast. Thank you for coming. We'll be following up more.